Good evening, Metuchen. I'm Betsy Robin Schwartz. Tonight, METV is bringing you live election results for Metuchen's 13 voting districts. The polls in New Jersey closed at 8 p.m., and the results from Metuchen are starting to come in. Tonight, METV will bring you the results as we receive them for the races for United States Senator, United States House of Representatives, Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders, Metuchen Board of Education, and 2 members of the Metuchen Borough Council. There are also 2 state questions and 2 county questions on the ballot. And for all of you at home, you can use Twitter to let us know what you think about tonight's election. Use hashtag METV 2014 vote, and we might read your tweet live on the air. Again, that's hashtag METV 2014 vote. Okay, let's review the candidates tonight and the questions everyone's voting on. Of course, this is a midterm election, and there are no local races that are garnering national attention. The closest thing is the Senate race. Tonight, joining me is Ken Webb. Ken, what do you think about these Senate races?
Well, first of all, it's great to be back here with you, Betsy, again, bringing the election results to the town of Metuchen. If you remember last year, the death of Senator Lautenberg gave Governor Christie the choice of when and how to call a special election for the one-year unexpired term. That election had one of the lowest percentage of voter turnouts in a statewide election ever in the state of New Jersey. Now Senator Booker is running for his first full 6-year term as senator, and he's challenged by Republican Jeff Bell in a regular statewide election, and it's been a very interesting race.
Well, I think people are familiar with Senator Booker, the former mayor of Newark, and he's been a national figure even, before he was a senator. But who's Jeff Bell, and what do you think his prospects are in this race?
Well, Jeff Bell is actually making his 3rd run for U.S. Senate in the state of New Jersey. The first time he ran in 1978, he was the youngest Senate candidate in the nation at the age of 34. Now, today, he is the oldest Senate candidate in the nation at the age of 70. In 1978, when Mr. Bell first ran, he unseated a 4-term incumbent Republican Senator Clifford Case in the primary election. It was a shocking result at the time. And it was at a time when, in the Northeast, there was actually a centrist, liberal, sometimes left-wing section of the Republican Party, and Senator Case was a part of that. Well, Mr. Bell unseated him in the primary, then lost to Senator Bill Bradley in the general election, and since then there has not been a U.S. Senator from the Republican Party in New Jersey. In 1982, Mr. Bell ran again when the seat was vacated by Harrison Williams due to his resignation, but he lost to Millicent Fenwick in the primary, who then subsequently lost to Senator Frank Lautenberg. Mr. Bell, however, has been a stalwart in the Republican Party, especially in the conservative movement of it, for many years. He was an aide and a speechwriter for Presidents Nixon and Reagan. And he ran in 1978 on what became a classic Republican platform for years of lower taxes, smaller government.
But Ken, we're really going back like 30 years.
Yes.
I mean, Senator Bell was part of a Washington think tank and lived in Virginia for the last 30 years.
That's correct, yes. He just returned to New Jersey and took an apartment in Leonia specifically to challenge Cory Booker in this race. And 2 of the main thrusts of his campaign have been the return of the U.S. dollar to the gold standard and eliminating the Federal Reserve's policy of no interest on federal government debt. He says that both changes would help revitalize America's economy, but frankly, they don't seem to be resonating very much with the voters, especially with younger voters where Senator Booker is very well entrenched. For instance, he has over 1 million followers on Twitter, where Mr. Bell has just over 700. So you really couldn't ask for a stronger contrast between 2 candidates.
Yeah, it really is a very big contrast, and we know that Senator Booker in the polls has had a substantial lead, But the size of that lead will really speak to how voters are feeling about the political climate, and it's more or less a referendum about how New Jersey voters feel about Cory Booker. What do you think, Metuchen? Tweet us at hashtag METV 2014 vote. Now, let's take a look at the candidates for House of Representatives, including the Democratic incumbent, which is Frank Pallone. Frank Pallone's been representing New Jersey's 6th congressional district since 1988. He's the senior Democrat in New Jersey's congressional delegation. He led the fight in Washington to protect New Jersey's environment and expand and improve health care coverage. He's the chair of the subcommittee on health and of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He also serves as the senior member of the House Natural Resources Committee, where he focuses on policies concerning fisheries and oceans, and we know that he was very influential in getting money to New Jersey after Hurricane Sandy as well. Pallone is being challenged by Anthony Wilkinson, who is a Republican, but you wouldn't know it if you drive past his campaign headquarters, which, interestingly enough, is right here in Metuchen on Main Street. Anthony lives in Old Bridge, and although he's running on Republican line, there's no mention of the Republican Party on his website or, well, what do you make of that, Ken?
It's an interesting way to challenge a Democratic incumbent in a mostly Democratic district. Frank Pallone is very popular in this district, and though Congress's approval rating has sometimes hovered around 12% or so, people have historically been reluctant to vote out their incumbents. A recent report on NBC's Meet the Press said that national candidates in some of the battleground states are taking on a very similar approach. They're driving around in campaign buses that have no sign of who their party is. Independency has become very in vogue. Nationally, it appears that this year it might be toxic to have your name associated with either party or either House of Congress. People appear to want to punish the ruling party while at the same time not rewarding the opposing party. But of course, it's also possible for many people to split their vote. You can be upset with Washington, but at the same time be perfectly content with your local government, so it'll be fascinating to see how it all shakes out.
Yeah, I think, a lot of Congress people, we were talking about this earlier, are very accessible, or you see them around town, or they get things for their constituents, like Frank Pallone did, let's say, with Hurricane Sandy or whatever. So people hate the people in Congress, but not their one. Not their congressperson.
Especially if they have a personal connection to them.
Yeah, that just keeps happening and happening. So the incumbents, it's really hard to get an incumbent out of office in Congress, and it's really rare that happens. Let's take a look at the freeholder candidates now. The freeholders have 2 seats open and it's for a 3-year term. There are actually 2 Democratic incumbents. The Democrats have held the freeholder seat for many, many years, and it's been pretty much solid Democrats in Middlesex County freeholders. And the Democratic incumbents are Carol Barrett. She's a 2-term freeholder, former deputy mayor in South Brunswick. And very involved in labor, including being the executive secretary of the Middlesex County Central Labor Council of the AFL-CIO. And the other person running for freeholders on the Democratic ticket is Charlie Tamaro. He served 1 term already as freeholder, and he's former Edison Township Council president, member of the Hands of Hope Community Food Bank Pantry, board of directors, and the former secretary of the board of Edison Chamber of Commerce. Carol Barrett and Charlie Tamaro are being challenged, of course, by 2 Republicans, Richard Green, who's a councilman from Old Bridge, and Stephanie Bartfavi from South Plainfield. Now, the freeholder board has been filled 7-0 by Democrats since 1995. You think that's going to change?
No, I don't. In spite of the anti-incumbency feeling that there may be nationwide, as we said, a lot of times people are perfectly satisfied with their local government. Middlesex County is still very strongly Democratic leaning. By all indications, I'd expect that the incumbents and the Democrats would hold the seats.
Now let's take a look at the candidates for Metuchen. There are 2 council seats that are being contested. The Democrats are Jay Muldoon, who's been on the Borough Council since 2010, and Reed Liebfried, who's a newcomer running for his first term. The Republicans are Steve Shapiro, who previously ran for mayor on the Republican ticket, and Walt Zawin, who's a retired Postal Service manager, and he's been very, very active in the community, including commander of the American Legion in Metuchen and other veterans organizations, very involved in the Memorial Day Parade, etc. What's interesting also, we're not just voting on the council, but for the first time, the Board of Education is on the ballot. Those seats. We used to have 2 elections, one in the spring for Board of Education, and then one in November, and now they're consolidated. There had been like a lot of talk about going back and forth with it, but throughout New Jersey now, most towns, I believe, have all the elections on the same day. Metuchen had been a holdout, and now we're part of that mainstream doing it. So we have 3 seats that are open for Metuchen Board of Ed, and 3 candidates are on the ballot unchallenged, so we probably won't be reading any results about that. They're unchallenged candidates. This is the first time this election is taking place at this time, and the candidates are Jackie Gibson, who's a current board member, Dan Benderly, also a current board member, and Benjamin Small, who's a newcomer to the Board of Ed. So momentarily we'll have the results from the Borough Clerk here at Borough Hall, and we'll have from Metuchen's 13 districts. We'll be looking at 5 districts shortly, and we'll bring the results to you. Let's see. So, while we wait for those results, I've been talking to a lot of people, and I say, "Are you going out to vote?" And they say to me, "Oh, I already voted." There's a lot of people who've gone out and are doing voting by mail. Early voting. In fact, I've heard from a lot of people that it's easy and accessible, so they're going ahead and doing it. Now, I guess those ballots need to be into the County Board of Elections by 8 o'clock today.
Yes.
Okay. So tell us more about this early voting thing.
It really is becoming a lot easier, and voting by mail is becoming more popular across the country to try and get more people involved in the process. It's called no-excuse voting because at one time you were only allowed to vote early by mail or submit an absentee ballot if you had a specific reason why you couldn't go to the polls on Election Day. Now in many states, no reason is required whatsoever. Early voting in person, where they designate a poll place ahead of time for people to go and place their votes before the actual Election Day, is now allowed with no excuse required in 33 states and in the District of Columbia. Absentee voting by mail, with no excuse, is allowed in 27 states and in D.C. And in addition, there are 20 additional states that will allow absentee voting by mail, but still require an excuse. Now, in New Jersey, there is no early voting. They don't set up polls ahead of time, but we have no excuse absentee voting. Absentee ballots or mail-in ballots can be obtained by going to your local county clerk's office and filling out an application. In Middlesex County, the clerk's office is located in New Brunswick. The ballots can be obtained starting 45 days before an election and then up until 3 p.m. on the day before the actual election date. They must then be returned and received by the County Board of Elections either by mail, by messenger, or in person no later than 8 p.m. on the day of the election, so right when the polls close. So any voter can now vote by mail in any election. You don't feel like going to the polls? Simply vote by mail. Now there's no excuse not to vote. And it's also possible to apply for and obtain permanent absentee status. So then you can vote by mail in every election.
And it's interesting. We'll have to wait and see how this impacts, the exit polling that that the media does and things like that. It'll be very interesting. Now I'm hearing we have results from 6 districts. Now let's take a look at these districts. We have District 6, which is Main Street and Amboy Avenue south of Amboy. District 7, which is the South Main Street area over by Edgar School and Myrtle Park. District 9, which is the southwest corner over by 287. District 10, which is Jefferson Park and down to New Durham. District 11, which is Durham Avenue, Franklin Square, Campbell School, that area. And District 12, which is Central Avenue to Main Street, Plainfield Avenue, sort of the northwest corner of town. So now let's take a look at some of these results from our from these first 6 districts. Let's see, what do we got? Ken? Here we go.
Well, these are the combined votes for those 6 districts just for Metuchen. And for U.S. Senate, Jeff Bell has 555 votes, Cory Booker has 993, and other have 22. I'd be interested in finding out who those other people are. For U.S. House of Representatives, in District 6, the Metuchen vote, Anthony Wilkinson, the Republican, has 537 votes. Frank Pallone has 982, and there are 17 votes cast for others. For Metuchen Borough Council, Walter Zawin, Republican, 573 votes. Stephen Shapiro, Republican, 530 votes. Jay Muldoon, Democrat, 967 votes. And Reed Liebfried, also a Democrat, 918 votes. For Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders, in the Metuchen vote, Richard Green, the Republican, has 563 votes. Stephanie Bartfalvi, also Republican, 537. Carol Barrett currently has 940 votes from these 6 districts. And Charles Tomorrow, also a Democrat, has 924 votes. There are also 2 state questions and 2 county questions on the ballot. Let's look at the results on those, Betsy.
Okay, let's take a look. State question number 1, allow the court to order pre-trial detention. Metuchen's vote was 713 for yes and 473 no. State question number 2, dedicating state funds for open space farmland. Yes, 860, and no, 348. And now we'll look at the county questions. County question number 1, this is just a question being voted on in Middlesex County. Dedicate funding to support cultural arts. Metuchen's vote is 800 yes, and no is 354. And county question number 2, increase funding for women's health care. Metuchen's vote is yes, 806 votes, and no, 339 votes. Now let's take a look here at, this is the overall result by district, and you can see that it appears that the Democrats have a very strong lead in each of these districts.
Yes, the early districts do appear to be going predominantly Democratic.
Yeah, very strong. Now it's interesting, in midterm elections, get out the vote really makes a difference, and it looks like, from what I see here, that the Democrats have really are getting out more of the vote. You can see it from the county offices, and, well, I guess from the top of the ticket down, it's sort of the same type of percentages. It looks like people are coming out. But that, again, is only 6 out of 13 districts, so things could change or the numbers could be swayed. That's just the early districts for now. You know, we talked about there are 2 state questions and 2 county questions. Let's take a look at them. The first state question is a constitutional amendment to allow the court to order pretrial detention of a person in criminal case. That's the title of it. That's the official title. Can you explain this? From the title, it's really difficult to get what this is all about.
It's a little bit complex. There are layers to it, but primarily it allows a change to the constitutional right to bail in the Constitution of New Jersey. It would allow judges to deny pretrial release of defendants who are considered a danger, a flight risk, or a threat to obstruct justice. Currently, New Jersey's Constitution only allows judges to deny bail to defendants who are charged with offenses that could be punishable by the death penalty. However, the state repealed the death penalty in 2007, so that means that all defendants for any offenses are currently eligible for bail in the state of New Jersey.
So nobody, no matter how heinous the crime, can be denied bail?
No one can be denied. Bails can be set very high, and in a lot of cases it's a de facto remand because the person can't afford to pay, but in a case where someone actually had the resources to be able to pay, you could be released prior to trial for virtually any offense right now in the state of New Jersey. The state enacted legislation that implements the amendment, but also it eliminates the need for cash bail to be posted for some nonviolent offenders. So it's a multi-layered approach that Governor Christie's trying to get through this amendment. The legislation that has been passed will only be enacted if the amendment passes. But it would allow a change in the language so that people who are charged with small offenses and have small amounts of bail don't have to put up the cash to be able to do it. Right now, on a typical day, 12% of the inmates in all of the county lockups are nonviolent offenders who can't make bail for $2,500 or less. So in addition to being able to deny bail for serious offenders, they're trying to reform the criminal system in New Jersey so that lower offenders are not a burden on the criminal justice system. And also, it's coupled with another push by Governor Christie to reform the drug court system in the state of New Jersey so that nonviolent and first offenders would be mandated for treatment as opposed to prison time.
That sounds very good. It's very, very interesting. Why would anybody push back against that?
The only people who are really pushing back against it right now are the Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers in New Jersey, who feel that it's an abrogation of bail rights that have been in the New Jersey Constitution from the time that it was written. But Governor Christie has put together a very strong coalition in support of it, including the ACLU and several other organizations, and it seems to me a logical approach to try and reform New Jersey's criminal justice system.
So let's take a look at this second public question. Now, this second statewide one. It's a constitutional amendment dedicating state funds for open space farmland and historic preservation and changing existing dedication for water programs, underground storage tanks, and hazardous site cleanups. Okay, that sounds like a no-brainer, but what's it really about?
Well, this one also contains layers of technicalities. Right now, there is a 4% corporate business tax that already sets aside money for environmental programs in New Jersey. But what this would do would create a permanent funding source for open space preservation, agriculture, and flood buyout programs. And it would also increase the amount of that tax that is dedicated to it from 4% to 6%. Now, this wouldn't begin until July 2019, but in the past, lawmakers in New Jersey have generally taken a piecemeal approach to purchasing open space. They've put bond issues out to ask the citizens of New Jersey to allow them to borrow money in order to purchase the open space. This would allow them to have a constant source of funding to do that on an ongoing basis. And it's interesting because a lot of votes like this are taking place across the nation, and environmental groups think this might be one of the biggest elections in terms of green space that have ever taken place in this country. And it's important for states like New Jersey that are uniquely small geographically but densely populated.
Okay, and then we have the two county questions as well, right? So,
yes.
What are those about? Let's see. The first one talks about, and I don't remember having county questions in quite a while, actually. So this is unusual for me. Shall the governing body of the County of Middlesex annually set aside and dedicate funding for the support of cultural arts in Middlesex County, including development, restoration, improvement to, and maintenance of cultural arts facilities, theaters, and other arts venues to encourage and provide support for quality arts education, to provide general support for the performing, presenting, and visual arts within the county, and to recognize and preserve the history and heritage of Middlesex County, including recognizing and honoring our veterans, and annually appropriate that revenue for that purpose. That's really a mouthful. And it's like so much stuff in there. What's the real story on this one?
The two county questions that appear on the ballot are non-binding referendums. Basically, what they're intended to do is measure public opinion within Middlesex County on the two questions that are being put forth. As reported by New Brunswick Today, the first county public question asks if the county government should create a trust fund that advocates and would be the first of its kind in New Jersey. It dedicates money toward the cultural arts in Middlesex County and puts funding toward it every year. Now, it doesn't really tell you how much money it's going to be or where they're going to redirect those funds from, but it basically gives an opinion from the citizens of Middlesex County that they wish to support the arts and that they feel that, you know, it would be okay to put some of their funds toward doing that. It would be distributed through a newly established Middlesex County Cultural and Arts Trust Fund, which, as you said, would provide arts education, history and heritage preservation, recognition of veterans, and support for performing arts and performing art facilities around the state.
Now, it's, well, around the county.
Around the county, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's interesting because the county is so very involved with it. We have plays in the park and kids in the park along with that. This whole program at Roosevelt Park. There's the Cultural and Heritage Commission. You know, so this is monies. The first I heard of it actually was I got an email from the State Theater. So it's interesting to me that some of these commercial facilities are, you know, supporting it. I wonder if they'll be getting monies from it or grants from it. And they regularly do get grants from the Cultural and Heritage Foundation, just like even in Metuchen we get some grants for programs by the Recreation Commission and the Cultural Arts Committee are often recipients of grants from Cultural and Heritage. So I'm really curious how all of this goes together. I guess it's to make sure that if state government cuts the funds, that there's still they can still allot county funds towards that. Is
exactly right. And it allows them to create this trust fund where they can continue to fund it annually and build up that money to replace what may be taken away by the state. There, as you mentioned, there is also a very thriving arts community in New Brunswick that has put a lot of support behind this amendment, and I'm sure that it's in part because they can then build educational programs and find funding for themselves, for their facilities, etc.
So now the second question is, let's see, this one is, shall the governing body, let's see, shall, in view of the recent cuts of funding by the state of New Jersey, shall the governing body of the County of Middlesex increase funding to support current women's health care programs in order to increase access for county residents to mammograms, cancer screening, and similar services specifically designed for women's health support and disease prevention. Now, that sounds interesting, but it's, you know, again, odd to see just here on the ballot like this.
It's, again, looking to measure public support, and it's a reaction to reductions in funding that the state has made for the county. They've cut back on funding for free women's health clinics, which in 2012 caused a reduction of roughly 24% of the amount of women who are actually using the clinics. They felt as though the reason for that was that the facilities were too crowded, the appointments were too difficult to get, and this would basically allow Middlesex County to redirect some of their own funds to take the place of what the state has taken away. It was basically a referendum that was pushed by a coalition of members of the Board of Freeholders who, as a reaction to the fact that the state had cut funding to things that they feel are vital, women to be able to get mammograms and cancer screenings, cervical exams. Middlesex County provides health care screenings through the clinics throughout the county, and this public question, the Freeholder Board would encourage people to increase the funding and therefore give better access to these clinics.
So I'm hearing that we have results from 3 more districts, and this is District 1. Let's take a look at where that is. That's north by the high school, all the way up there. District 3, which is over by Neve Shalom and Route 27, the railroad tracks over there. And District 13, which is Tulsa Avenue, Lincoln Avenue, Charles, east of Main Street there. So let's take a look at some of those results. Ken?
Well, in our first race for U.S. Senate, in those 3 districts.
This would be all the districts together, so 9.
Oh, this is the aggregate
yes,
of all 9.
All 9 together.
Okay, great. Jeffrey Bell, the Republican, currently has 854 votes. Senator Cory Booker, the Democrat, has 1,462, and 28 votes have been cast for others. In the U.S. House of Representatives race, District 6, Anthony Wilkinson, the Republican, currently has 841 votes, 37%. Frank Pallone, the Democrat, has 1,443, which is 63% of the vote, and 20 votes have been cast for others. In Middlesex County, for Board of Chosen Freeholders, Richard Green, the Republican, has 884 votes. Stephanie Bartfalvi, Republican, 855. Carol Barrett, 1,360, and her fellow Democrat Charles Tomorrow has 1,342 votes. For Metuchen Borough Council, Walter Zawin, 878 votes. Stephen Shapiro, 832 votes. Jay Muldoon, 1,422 votes. And Reed Liebfried, 1,324 votes. Now let's see how we're doing on the public questions. Betsy?
Well, Metuchen voted on state question number 1, which is allow the court to order pretrial detention. Yes, 1,118 votes. No, 661 votes. On state question number 2, dedicating state funds for open space farmland, Metuchen voted yes, 1,303 votes. No, 525 votes. Dedicating county question number 1, dedicating funds to support cultural arts, Metuchen voted yes, 1,205 votes, and no, 540 votes. And county question number 2, increasing the funding for women's health care, yes, 1,198 votes, no, 537 votes. Now, let's take a look by district, how each did in each of the districts. Well, you know what's interesting? In District 1, it looks like the Republicans ran really, really strong there.
They had a very strong
showing,
yes.
Actually beat out Reed Liebfried in the number of votes there. That's kind of interesting. But Jay Muldoon, who's the only incumbent, he's the current council person, is definitely making a very strong showing in that district. And in fact, I guess across the board, it looks like Jay has gotten the most votes, and you know, and then on the Republican side, of course, Walt Zawin got more votes than Shapiro. But it looks to me like that's District 1 is the district where the Republicans made the strongest show.
It definitely appears that way, yes. And it looks like there's quite a broad support for Mr. Muldoon.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very strong. Now, what's interesting, though, first, this is only partial results. That's 9 out of the 13 districts, so we're waiting on results from 4 more districts. And if I recall, I don't remember exactly what the numbers were last year, which was the gubernatorial election and the Senate election with Senator Booker and, Barbara Buono and Chris Christie coming from here. So, so what I recall is that it was a larger number than this is. And I think this is probably typical for a midterm election. Maybe even a little bit stronger show, I think, when I've added up. Because last year, of course, it's not like a presidential election, but I think there was about 4,400 people that cast votes last year. And this is less than that, but not as much less. It's certainly less than we get in presidential election. But it's all about the get out the votes, right? And traditionally here in Metuchen, candidates have walked door to door, and that's been really effective. But we're in a transition period, I think. We were talking about earlier about how, pollsters doing exit polls, but how do you do an exit poll when people have voted by mail or something like that? And the same is true with how do you really gauge the get out the vote effort when there's Facebook and Twitter?
That's very true. A lot of times now when the pundits are trying to get a hold of election results, without any access to the mail-in ballots or with absentee ballots still behind when the regular election results are coming in, they're making assumptions based on demographics or extrapolating percentages of what they've already seen. It's made it a little trickier.
Yeah. So, Metuchen, let us know what you think about this. You can tweet us live at hashtag METV2014vote. What do you think about getting out the vote? How does that, how do people do it? What's the most effective way of communicating? The candidates, Democratic candidates had a Facebook, the subtitle is, the hashtag that just came up on the screen is wrong. I want everybody to know it's hashtag METV2014 vote, not 2013 vote. Hashtag METV 2014 vote. Okay, and we'll be looking for your tweets, and you can even tweet us after the show as well. But keeping an eye on Twitter and seeing what comes up, and we appreciate your comments and compliments, and anything you'd like to speak to us about, whether privately, during, or whatever, we've got it here. Again, that's hashtag METV 2014 vote. Let's see. So getting out the vote has been really, really important, and the social media is really important. But I'm wondering about the impact of early voting, or this vote by mail. Now, you were saying earlier, we were talking about there are actually 3 states that you don't have to show up at a polling place at all?
There are 3 states where their entire election today is by mail: Colorado, Washington, and Oregon.
And they don't have to go to the polls, or they're not closing the schools or anything like that?
No, you can still participate by bringing your vote-in mail ballots, similar to the way it is in New Jersey, prior to the close of what would be the election day that day in those states. But every ballot came in by mail. It should be very interesting to see how that all shakes out. I wonder if it means that they'll have results sooner.
We heard that, we were wondering about that too, but what we had heard was when the ballots come in, these absentee ballots, that they're actually counted, but that result is not shared until Election Day, so that they don't have to count them all up on Election Day, and we can get the results sooner. So although these results that we're looking at now, I don't believe that they include the absentee or the early voting results, but they will be added in shortly. Those results will be added in shortly, and we do have a line for it. as you can see on our results. So these results don't include the mail-in, but those mail-in votes, I think more and more are going to start swaying the results of things too.
I think we'll find a higher volume of them in the future as elections go on. And it will be interesting because right now, as you mentioned, the Get Out the Vote, a lot of grassroots organizations within the parties are focused right on the day of the election, getting people on the phone and saying, are you getting out to vote? And the robocalls and all the grassroots efforts that are put in across the country. It'll be interesting to see how that changes when
well, you know,
the volume of mail changes.
I can't remember exactly when I got this. Yeah, here, this is a vote-by-mail ballot from, maybe a year or two ago. But this came from one of the political parties, actually. So that is the thing that they're doing. So it's a vote-by-mail ballot, and you don't really see anything about, it doesn't look like a political piece. It just looks like a vote-by-mail ballot, right? But in the small print, it says, sent by the state committee, and, and inside it's got some more things on political candidates. So this page is actually, go ahead and vote. And this page is all about, hey, by the way, we have these candidates going. So this
we just happen to have these candidates too.
This may be the future, because there's nothing stopping any political parties, or local or national, from mailing out these ballots. So
and
then
clearly, the Democratic Party is way ahead of the curve in terms of getting out the vote by mail. They feel that it advances their cause a little bit better at this point.
So I'm hearing that we have the results from districts 2 and 8. So let's take a look at that. District 2 is Main Street, St. Francis to Rector Street, and the railroad track. So you can see District 2. And then District 8 is the area around Tommy's Pond. So let's take a look at what it looks like with those two districts being added in. So that's now a total of 11 out of 13 districts. And Ken, you want to take a look?
Certainly. Right now, for U.S. Senate, Republican Jeff Bell has 37% of the vote, 1,070 votes. Democratic incumbent Cory Booker has 1,822 votes, 62%. And 38 votes have been cast for others. Clearly, that's moving according to form at the moment. In the U.S. House of Representatives race in District 6, Republican Anthony Wilkinson has 37% of the vote, 1,057 votes. Democrat Frank Pallone, 1,801 votes for 63%, and 23 votes have been cast for others. In the Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders race for a 3-year term, the Metuchen vote for Richard Green, Republican, 1,105 votes. Stephanie Bartfalvy, Republican, 1,066 votes. Carol Barrett, Democrat, 1,696 votes. And Charles Tomorrow, Democrat, 1,673 votes. For Metuchen Borough Council, Walter Zawin, Republican, has 1,105 votes. Republican Stephen Shapiro has 1,042 votes. Democrat Jay Muldoon, 1,769 votes. And Democrat Reed Liebfried, 1,648 votes. Let's see how we're doing with the questions.
Okay, so let's look at state question number 1. To allow the court to order pretrial detention, Metuchen voted yes, 1,418, no, 847. On state question number 2, Metuchen voted yes, 1,659, no, 658. On county question number 1, dedicate funding to support cultural arts, Metuchen voted yes, 1,528, no, 683. And for county question number 2, increasing the funding for women's health care, Metuchen voted 528, yes. No, 668. And now let's take a look again at the individual districts. So again, it seems, even adding in the District 2 and District 8, there still is, very, very strong support for the Democrats, and it does look like they made the better effort, I guess, in getting out the vote.
It does appear that it's trending that way across the board, though.
Yeah,
Jay
with the
Muldoon is
exception
very
of
strong.
with the exception of District 1, where while Zawin got and Steve Shapiro got more votes than Reed Leapfree did, I think it's pretty much across the board. But that's what we would expect if it winds up that the Democrats were more successful with their get out the vote effort.
It seems that Metuchen is strongly in favor of supporting the public questions as well.
Yeah, and almost by the same kinds of margins as we're seeing, right, with the Senate race and the congressional race being, close to, 65, 60-40 or 70-30, somewhere within that range. And we're seeing the same kinds of numbers in the endorsement of the questions. Does that surprise you at all?
It doesn't really, no. It seems to be running pretty closely according to demographics. The one thing I didn't mention earlier on the second public question related to women's health, the people who've been really pushing back against it are New Jersey's Right to Life organization and some of the other more social conservative organizations that feel that it's just a way to veil additional funding for Planned Parenthood, which they feel promotes abortions.
So, but this was really put forth by the county, this question, to make up for funds that were lost on state from the state budget. And it really seems to me that that these two questions were kind of targeted at Governor Christie.
And I think that it makes a strong case for the Middlesex County lawmakers if they can demonstrate that they have strong public support for this. And if they want to try and fight back against the cuts that the state is making, it makes their case even stronger.
But it doesn't actually bind anybody to it. It's not saying it says they have the ability to allocate the funds, but they're not necessarily going to allocate the funds.
Right, almost as though they're telling the state, well, if you dare us, we'll do it because the public is behind us.
And, and I saw somebody mentioned on Facebook, it was a musician friend of mine posted something about be careful with this one funding cultural arts. Does that mean, we don't know if that means that it's going to take money from other sources or redirect it by doing that. But, which is true, nobody really knows where it is coming from, how much it would be, or anything, because it's really a referendum to gauge public opinion.
Right, and purposely vague, I'm sure, to try and ensure the result that the lawmakers are looking for by putting the question out there.
Well, it's interesting that they did that, though. And like I said, I don't remember very many county questions. Usually we have, one or two state questions, but in the times that I've been doing this election coverage, I just don't really recall there being any strong county questions like that.
I agree, yes. State questions are common, and actually I believe in the last election both of the ones we had there were related to constitutional amendments as well, just as they are today. But county questions are unusual. This was obviously a strong reaction by the County Board of Chosen Freeholders to what's been going on within the state government in terms of funding.
Well, and I find it interesting, too, even the state question on the, that's environmental impact and, setting aside for open space, etc., that there's not even a lot of pushback against it being a constitutional amendment, and that's significant to change the state constitution for something. Who are the organizations that are pushing back against that one?
Against the environmental question? Mm-hmm. It's primarily groups who are going to lose funding as a result of the fact that it's being redirected to open space. There are some environmental groups that have had specific pet projects that they've been involved in that have been receiving funding through the state through the 4% of the corporate business tax that's been allocated to it. And now that some of that money is now going to be redirected to saving open space, they feel like it's being taken, basically borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and that they're losing out as a result.
You know, there was another thing that we had talked about the other day. We were talking about how campaigns are looking for contributions, and they're spending a lot of that money on television ads. But the younger demographic is moving away from television, or people have DVRs, and so they're skipping over the commercials. How do you think all of this is going to change?
I think we're in the midst of a real evolution right now. It's going to have to change the way that political parties look at reaching out to the public, because a lot of people are getting rid of their landlines and just relying on their cell phones, so the robocalls won't be as effective. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond to it as things change.
Yeah, I've been seeing a flood in my... I thought last year was bad with getting email, but this year it was incredible, just deluge from all these different packs and delete, but they also have these one-touch to contribute things via email. It's very interesting how technology is actually affecting the way campaigns are run and the outcome of these things too.
And as you mentioned with contributions, I think that the average voter who has contributed in the past to an election might in the future start to think a little bit more carefully about where they're putting their money based on how it's being spent. Nationwide, this was the most expensive election that this country's ever had.
And there's actually been and it's interesting for a midterm election too that's the most expensive. But there have been, I remember last year's races, there wasn't as much of a correlation between the outcome of the race and the amount of money spent too. So that's happening more and more. It'll be interesting to see how that starts working its way through in the future, and we're actually in a great time of change with social media and different kinds of outlets. But you see things too, how media is diversifying itself. For instance, let's say with this broadcast, because we can have people who are watching us live right now via Cablevision channel 15, but they can also watch us on live stream, via the borough website, and this will be available as a video on demand download from the borough website, and links will be posted on Facebook and all of that. So the way people consume the media is different. The way they consume coverage, not just in the big world, for CNN, but also here in Metuchen too. It's very interesting. So we have two more districts, districts 4 and 5. District 4 is over by Moss Street School, and let's see, and District 5, that's north of Woodbridge Avenue by the railroad tracks there. And so let's take a look at the results for District 5. District 4 and 5 added in, so this is now all 13 districts. These are the results without the early voting results, with the everything but vote by mail.
In Metuchen for U.S. Senate, Jeff Bell, the Republican, has received 1,277 votes for 37%. Senator Cory Booker, incumbent Democrat, has received 2,173 votes for 62%, and other candidates have received 47 votes. It would be interesting to find a breakdown of who those 47 people are that other individuals voted for. That could be another show entirely. For U.S. House of Representatives in District 6, Anthony Wilkinson, Republican, has 1,265 votes for 37%. Democratic incumbent Frank Pallone has 2,143 votes for 62%, and there were 32 votes placed for other people. In the Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders race, Republican Richard Green has 1,327 votes. Stephanie Bartfalvey, the Republican, has 1,276 votes. Carol Barrett, Democrat, has 2,018. And Charles Tomorrow, Democrat, has 1,995. And in the Metuchen Borough Council race, Walter Zawin has 1,309 votes. Stephen Shapiro, 1,216. Jay Muldoon, 2,136. And Reed Liebfried, 1,996. And now for a final look at the public questions.
State question number 1, allow court to order pretrial detention. Metuchen voted yes, 1,718 votes, or 63% of the vote. No, 1,016 votes, or 37% of the vote. For state question number 2, dedicating state funds for open space farmland, Metuchen voted yes, 1,997, or 71% of the vote. No, 802 votes, or 29% of the vote. On the county questions, county question number 1, dedicate funding to support cultural arts, Metuchen voted yes, 1,839 votes, or 69% of the vote. No, 825 votes, or 31% of the vote. For county question number 2, increase funding for women's health care, Metuchen voted yes, 1,842 votes, or 70% of the vote. No, 870 votes, and 7 votes, or 30% of the vote. Now, we'll take a look with all districts reporting. This is everything but the mail-in early voting and absentee ballots. We can see, again, that the Democrats have won pretty decisively. The total votes for Walt Zawin are 1,309 votes. For Steve Shapiro, 1,216 votes. For Jay Muldoon, 2,136 votes. For Reed Liebfried, 1,996 votes. So those are the final results from Metuchen, and we'll be keeping those up when we go off the air. Thank you, Ken Webb. It was great discussing with you. And thanks to our viewers who made it an interactive experience for us. And you can still tweet to METV, hashtag METV 2014. Vote. We'll be looking out for your tweets. And again, that's hashtag METV 2014 vote. Or, make your comments on the borough's Facebook page. That's Borough of Metuchen government page. This concludes METV's coverage for election night 2014. Thanks again, Ken. It was great.
Thanks for having me here. I really
And
appreciate it.
for METV, I'm Betsy Robin Schwartz. Good night, Metuchen.